The movie starts with the text on screen, many years after the rapture. Among the survivors, some are driven to renounce their sin of speech. Then, we see a pregnant woman in a white dress named Miriam, painting on a wooden wall. The scene then cuts to Azrael, who hears a noise in the air. She ignores it and moves forward. Next, she is seen making a bracelet out of stems and red berries when she suddenly hears a noise. She becomes alert and moves ahead. Then, she sees a man sitting in front of a fire. She quickly rushes over and puts out the fire, looking around cautiously. She pushes the man and then walks away. Later, they are seen hugging each other, followed by a kiss. She gently closes his eyes and puts on the bracelet she made for him on his wrist. Suddenly, they hear a noise and, frightened, they run away. They hide behind a tree, and after a while, the man sits her down and runs in the opposite direction. A little later, Azrael follows him. After running for quite a distance, when she stops and looks back, she sees a man in front of her. In fear, she runs in the other direction and collides with another man. He kicks her hard, and both men grab her and drag her away. She notices that they've also captured her boyfriend. When he tries to fight back, a woman places a sword at his throat. Then, they lock Azrael in the trunk of a car. One of the men whistles, and both cars drive off with them. The scene cuts to two men dragging Azrael to a specific spot. She notices a chair in the center, and two more people standing with their backs turned. The men forcibly seat Azrael in the chair, while the others help tie her hands and feet. One of the men checks the cross mark on Azrael's neck. Then, a woman approaches her, kneels in front, and makes a deep cut on Azrael's leg with a knife, causing blood to trickle down. Suddenly, the wind begins to blow, and everyone looks around in silence. Then, all four individuals step away from Azrael, turning their backs toward her. A moment later, they all start breathing heavily. Azrael, still bound, notices a creature in the distance approaching her. The creature lets out a chilling scream, and the others begin breathing even more heavily. Azrael struggles desperately to free herself, and the creature moves toward her. One of the men looks behind and notices that Azrael is close to escaping. He informs his partner and runs to restrain her again. While keeping an eye on the creature, he tries to tie Azrael up, but suddenly, a wooden shard from the chair tied to Azrael's hand pierces his neck. Blood starts pouring from his throat and mouth, and he attempts to escape, but the creature attacks him. It tears his throat open and drinks his blood. The other men think the creature is attacking Azrael, but in reality, it is violently devouring their partner. In the meantime, Azrael succeeds in freeing herself and runs away from the scene. Then, one of the men notices his partner is missing and realizes Azrael has escaped. He rushes to investigate, and we see the creature dragging their partner away. Azrael reaches an abandoned building, exhausted and breathing heavily. She makes her way to a nearby river and cleans the wound on her leg. While crossing the river, she recalls her kiss. Later, she plucks 2 leaves, crushes them, and applies them to her wound before tying it with a piece of cloth. Just then, a creature appears behind her. She turns to look at it and, overcome with fear, quietly runs away, hiding in the corner of a room. The creature approaches, stands at the door for a moment, and then leaves. Azrael exhales in relief. The scene cuts to Azrael escaping onto a dirt road. She notices tire marks on the ground and follows them, eventually reaching the cult's location. She sees several tent houses set up inside. Somehow, she manages to sneak in and cautiously moves forward between the tents. Suddenly, she bumps into something, alerting a nearby man. Reacting quickly, Azrael runs and hides behind a car. Just then, she spots her boyfriend's bracelet nearby. She rushes to pick it up, but notices 2 people approaching. Panicked, She quickly hides behind a tent. Just then, a woman from the cult enters the same tent and gently comforts a sick old woman. The woman is then seen entering a church, where Miriam is present. Many of Miriam's followers are seated on benches in front. The woman moves forward and we hear the sound of the creature. She then notices several strange paintings and a crack in the wall. Miriam listens closely to the creature's sound, and after a while, it suddenly stops. She then blows out the candle. All the followers leave the room, and the woman steps closer to Miriam. Miriam turns to her and, frustrated by her failure, slaps her hard. Just then, they hear a noise. Miriam walks to the window to check, looks around, but finds nothing. Meanwhile, Azrael, who is hiding beneath the church, sees the woman exiting. The woman then begins walking around the church. Terrified, Azrael hides in a corner. Just then, she hears a creaking sound, and suddenly the woman appears, grabs her leg, climbs over her, and starts strangling her. Azrael struggles, kicking the woman to push her back. She kicks again, finally breaking free and escaping. She runs and hides behind a tent, watching people working nearby. Just then, the woman rings a metal bell, and every cult member starts clanking metal objects. One of the men spots Azrael trying to escape and sprints towards her at full speed. Azrael gets caught in barbed wire, and the man grabs her leg, but she eventually manages to break free. One of the men fires a shot at her, but she narrowly avoids it and keeps running. As she keeps running, night falls, and she becomes extremely exhausted. Gasping for breath, she stops to rest on a rock for a moment before moving forward. However, her blood stains the rock. A short distance ahead, she hears a noise and turns to see a creature licking her blood off the stone. The creature looks up at her, and another one starts chasing her. The creatures shriek as they pursue Azrael, desperately trying to escape. She keeps running and eventually stumbles onto a road right in front of an approaching car. A man steps out of the car. Seeing him, Azrael freezes in fear. The man asks, "Are you one of the survivors?" He helps her up and asks, "Why are you covered in blood?" Azrael rushes into the car and slams the dashboard. The man asks, "Are you alone?" She bangs the dashboard again. Sensing her urgency, he gets in, and they drive off. As they move ahead, he hands her a cloth for her bleeding hand. "I live at the end of this road," he says. "There's food there too." Azrael then shows him a cross-shaped mark on her neck. He asks, "What is this? Where did it come from?" She simply smiles. He then turns on the music, and Azrael looks surprised. As he starts nodding to the rhythm, she mimics him. Just then, he got a headshot from one of the cult members. The car, now out of control, rams into the cultist before crashing violently into a wall. Azrael stumbles out of the car, injured and exhausted. She walks away, but collapses onto her knees. Just then, she notices a cultist and rushes toward him to attack. In the struggle, a shot is fired from the cultist's gun, and both of them tumble to the ground. The cultist quickly reloads his gun, but finds it's empty. He then strikes Azrael on the leg with the gun. A fierce fight ensues between them. In the heat of the struggle, the cultist grabs her from behind. In that moment, Azrael manages to grab a gun and shoots him in the head, ending the fight. Exhausted, she gets up and moves forward. She moves deeper into the woods, her heart racing. Suddenly, she spots someone lying under a tree in the distance. With her gun ready, she cautiously approaches and realizes it's her boyfriend. She rushes toward him but gets trapped, hanging from a rope. Just then, one of the cultists arrives, picks up the gun, and hits her boyfriend in the face with it. The wind picks up, and the cultist looks around cautiously. Meanwhile, Azrael struggles to free herself, but blood from her hand drips onto the ground. Suddenly, a creature attacks the cultist, slamming his head against a tree, dragging his face across the bark, and starts licking the blood on the tree. The cultist tries to escape, but several creatures grab him and begin tearing him apart, devouring his body. One creature rips off his head and drinks his blood. After a while, the creatures leave, taking the cultist's body with them. Relieved, Azrael and her boyfriend exchange a glance, but just then, a creature attacks him. Another creature starts climbing the tree to reach Azrael. One creature drags her boyfriend away, while the other continues to climb. Azrael manages to free her leg from the noose, and as the creature approaches to attack, she loops the noose around its neck, causing it to hang. Azrael falls to the ground, badly injured and exhausted. She struggles to get up. She moves forward, coughing and gasping for breath. Then she picks up the gun and continues onward. She approaches the cult's location and hides behind a tree. She whistles, and a few cultists step out, responding with a whistle of their own. When no response comes, they move deeper into the woods, searching for their members. Seizing the opportunity, Azrael slips in and moves forward cautiously. She heads toward the church and enters. Inside, she points her gun at Miriam as she steps forward. Miriam turns and places her hand on her belly. Azrael gets distracted by Miriam's gesture. In that instant, Miriam strikes Azrael hard with a pan. Azrael collapses, her hand scraping against Miriam's dress as she falls. She is then seen being dragged by two men deep into the woods, where they force her to sit in front of a grave. One of them smears blood on her face as the wind begins to howl. Moments later, they throw her into the coffin. Azrael watches in horror as they place the lid over her. She frantically bangs on it, trying to escape, but they continue shoveling dirt on top, burying her alive. After a while, they remove a panel from the foot side of the coffin, revealing a hidden tunnel. Azrael breathes heavily and starts crawling toward the other end of the tunnel. She moves slowly, her hands trembling. Suddenly, she hears a sound behind her. She turns, but no one is there. Brushing off her fear, she continues forward and spots a faint glimpse of an exit. Just then, a creature appears, startling her. It moves toward her, and Azrael panics, rushing back toward the coffin. As she reaches the end, the creature closes in, sniffing the smell of blood. It lets out a silent, eerie scream, haunting her. But Azrael screams back. The creature then sniffs her fingers intently. A flashback reveals the moment Azrael had scraped Miriam's belly, getting her blood on her fingers. The creature sniffs again, then suddenly calms down. Slowly, it steps back and retreats into the darkness without harming her. Azrael exhales in relief, finally able to breathe again. The scene shifts to the cultists returning to their camp. One woman enters the old woman's tent and gently strokes her. Meanwhile, Azrael manages to escape from the grave. Elsewhere, Miriam is seen cleaning the wound on her belly. The woman approaches her and holds Miriam's hands, but suddenly, they hear a noise outside. The woman steps out and sees the old woman's tent engulfed in flames. She rushes over, trying to put out the fire, and soon everyone is scrambling to help. One man rings a bell, and people emerge from their tents. Slowly, flames begin spreading from tent to tent. The woman watches as a gunshot hits a cultist. A cultist picks up her gun, and Azrael fires at her butt, misses. The woman shoots at Azrael, but Azrael quickly retaliates, shooting and killing the woman. She then shoots another woman. Within moments, the entire area is ablaze. Another cultist grabs a gun and searches for Azrael. Azrael fires at him, but misses. Suddenly, he hears a whistle. He moves forward, then hears the whistle again and turns toward it. Confused, the cultist fires his weapon, only to realize he's shot a fellow cult member. Just then, Azrael charges at him from behind and swiftly decapitates him. Azrael then moves toward the church, gripping a sword tightly in her hand. As she steps inside, she finds it eerily empty. Suddenly, Miriam attacks her from behind, and an intense fight breaks out between them. Miriam lunges at Azrael with a knife, but misses. Azrael retaliates, shoving her against the wall before sinking her teeth into Miriam's neck, tearing off a piece of her skin. Just then, Miriam's water breaks. She looks at Azrael and smiles. A gunshot rings out. A cultist enters, firing as she moves forward. Meanwhile, Miriam struggles, delivering the baby on her own. Azrael seizes the moment and attacks the woman, sending them both crashing to the ground. The woman grabs a wooden plank and strikes Azrael, but Azrael counters, slashing her leg. Another brutal fight ensues. Azrael grabs a knife and plunges it into the woman. As the woman pulls the knife from her body, she hears a baby's cries. She smiles weakly before collapsing. Miriam, trembling, steps out after giving birth. She slits her own throat, killing herself. As she dies, all the candles in the church extinguish at once. A powerful wind howls through the building. Outside, creatures begin to move toward the church, drawn by the baby's haunting cries. The monstrous horde floods into the cult's burning camp before making its way inside the church. Azrael, now holding the baby, steps forward to face them. The creatures let out deafening shrieks. At that moment, the true form of the satanic baby is revealed, grotesque, inhuman, and unlike anything of this world. Azrael looks at the creatures, a twisted, eerie smile spreading across her face. The scene cuts to black and movie ends here. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the chills, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a scare. Until next time, stay spooky.